Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Sheila Slick, CTO and founder of PodtoBook.ai. Welcome, Sheila. Thanks so much for joining us on the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing.
Well, thank you for having me, John. I am so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Could we start off and could you tell me a little bit about your role as CTO and founder of PodtoBook.ai and also what's your background with marketing?
Absolutely. So I founded PodtoBook.ai to solve a problem that I saw not only across the entrepreneurial community, but the podcasters. And after 25 years of being an entrepreneur myself and 2 years of being a podcast host, and also I've mentored hundreds of entrepreneurs throughout my career, I noticed that experts, and I call them experts because we're sharing messages based on our expertise, our experience, our lives, and we're creating this incredible podcast or audio content, but we're struggling to repurpose it and to leverage it for authority building. And so my background is that I learned how to code, well, when the iPod Touch was introduced or the mobile application, and eventually earned a NASA recognition for educational apps that I had built. And that was my technical foundation that led me to embrace AI today, step out of my own comfort zone again, and build PodtoBook.ai. And what that does is it transforms audio, whether it be a podcast or an audio, into professionally structured book manuscripts in 2 to 3 hours. So from a marketing perspective, I believe in the power of storytelling to build authority. And I believe that publishing a book positions you as the expert in your field. And normally it takes months or even years. And so with PodtoBook, we're changing that and we're repurposing content that we've already created.
Great. Well, that sounds like a really good and helpful service to folks. I was wondering, what, because we talked about how your background is more on the technical side, though you're an entrepreneur as well in business. What is marketing to you from those years of experience?
So marketing goes 15 years before that, because that is my major. I am a business major with a specialty in marketing. And so marketing begins with understanding the 4 P's: product, price, place, and promotion. And if I want to put that in a context, I'll use PodtoBook.ai because that's what I'm working on today. So PodtoBook.ai, it solves the content repurposing challenge. The price, the P for the price, well, that ranges from $3.49 if you want to do it yourself and just use a tool. But if you want a done for you package where you end up with a published book, a physical published book that's available in Amazon, that may range up to $4,000 for the complete package. Place, the P for place, is really important because it's where you're going to meet these people. Where are you going to show up? Well, you have to show up where they're at. So, for example, we are going in January. We will be in PodFest, and PodFest is an event with over 2,000 podcasters and authors. And so whether it be in person or online, we're looking for the places where the people hang out. And lastly, promotion is about demonstrating value. So our tagline going into PodFest and our communities right now is your podcast is already a book. We'll prove it.
Great, great, great. So on to agile marketing. Agile marketing is this process where I'm sure you're familiar with this, having done some programming, where the agile concept started, about 20 years ago or 25 years ago in that ski lodge in Utah, and it was an effort to refine the methodologies for how developers manage their processes. And then it jumped to marketers, in that I think that product marketers were working with developers, and they started to see the benefits to programmers and developers of Agile. And they thought, oh, well, maybe we can use this with essentially with marketing. And a lot of the concepts, it's really about managing your work. And sometimes I feel as if the term agile is the wrong term. It really should be focused, because what often happens with marketing teams is that they get a lot of work, and they want to do everything, and they don't always tell people that they can't do everything. And I think actually programmers and developers are much more willing to say that they're overwhelmed, and use Agile as a process to focus on the work that they need to do. So what's Agile marketing to you? In terms of managing the work of marketing and that focus.
Well, for me, agile marketing is about three things: speed, iteration, and responsiveness. So back to PodtoBook.ai, instead of waiting months or years to publish a book, our clients have a manuscript in 2 to 3 hours. And that's agile in action. But it goes way deeper than speed. Agile marketing means testing, and that's as a software developer and as a marketing strategist, right? Because you have to test the message, you have to test the product. It means learning and adapting and doing that quickly. And from the software developer in me, because I am the CTO, I'm the one that coded it, it's really important to listen to that user feedback. And the quicker that you listen and the quicker that you can adapt or make those changes is critical. With our ad campaign, are they responding to the message, we can prove it, or are they responding to the message, you can do it in 30 days? And so doing that and doing it quickly, just like a startup, you're validating or you're failing real quick. And so the quicker that you can identify what's working and what's not helps you to double down. So by listening to the customer experiences, we're constantly going back, whether it just means to tweak the message on the website, or perhaps even create a new product or a new version. One of our first and best clients just asked us for a specific application. Instead of it delivering a manuscript, can it do a white paper? I said, absolutely. And so we're testing it back and forth. Is the formatting correct? Is this what you're looking for? Because the faster that we can adapt, the faster we can serve. And so every feature comes from listening to our own market and then iterating quickly. And for our clients, it means that they can respond to trends in their industry quickly, whether it be by repurposing, those podcast episodes. They can turn them into lead magnets, white paper soon, and they're not locked in to really long production cycles. So they can publish, they can test that market response, and then they can adjust their strategy in real time.
Let's go to our sponsor.
Hey, marketers. Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
That sounds very good. When I think of Agile, I don't think of speed, though, in the sense that it's not about working more quickly. It's rather because of the focus that you have, which is, say you've got a lot of projects, say you've got 30, and that's too many to do. Those projects can slow down the entire process. But by focusing on the projects that you do need to do, it doesn't mean that you work faster. Rather, you end up being faster because you actually get work done. So speed doesn't come from working more quickly. And I think that's really important to say, especially to marketing teams, because they hear the word agile or quick and they say, oh, you're expecting me to work extra hours here so that I can get the work done. Actually, I don't expect them to do that. I expect them to be transparent about what they can do and cannot do, and work at the same pace and work at a reasonable pace. But by focusing on the work that actually needs to get done, it means that they're less stressed out, and they actually do a better job because they're putting more focus on the work that needs to get done. So speed to me is a dangerous word to use almost with marketing teams, because I've seen so many times in my professional career where it puts the marketing team off, in the sense that they think, oh, now you want me to work extra. Whereas I think Agile is more about being focused, in that it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter, and it's about doing the work that you actually need to do. I mean, for a good example, whether it's developers or marketers, what sometimes happens is that you start working on a project that you don't really need to be working on. And I think that's one of the reasons why those stand-up meetings are really important, because it's not about you talking to the team and saying, oh, I'm working on these, and then thinking it through, and the team coming back to you and saying, do you really need to be working on that? It's really about you thinking about what you really need to be working on, and having that open and transparent conversation with the rest of the team to realize what the impediments are, what it is that's really important. And so I think the check-ins, whether it's daily or on a regular basis, help team members to really focus on the work that they need to work on, and not do work that they don't need to do. And sometimes that also means, what often happens in marketing departments or with marketing teams is that you go to the stakeholders like sales or the CEO, who come along and ask for other work, and that might need to be done, for the company's sake, for the most profitable relationships in the company. That work might need to be done. But I think it's okay for both developers and for marketers to push back and say, well, we could do that work, but that would mean this work over here, which will earn us, $1 million extra if we do this work, is more important. Are you sure you want us to do this other work that you've just introduced? Because it knocks off all the other schedules. So to me, the biggest issue in marketing, and I think it's the same in development, although I think the difference between development and marketers is, for marketers, not only do we have the work that we need to do, but also We have, the customers that are out there and they make different decisions. And there's also competitors. So if a competitor comes along and it has a lower price, all of a sudden marketing has to scramble and come up with a different price, right? So I think marketing is actually a much more chaotic situation because you have to work with all of these different dynamics that go on. Obviously, product people with developers have some of those same constraints as well, but it's even more dynamic with marketers. And I really think that speed is a consequence of working in an agile way. And but I think we have to make that point to marketers because otherwise they're not going to adopt the practice because they're going to say, oh, that just means you want me to work faster and I'm going to have to work harder and I'm going to have to work more, do more work. What's your thoughts on that, on my take on that, Sheila?
Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And I think where we see it a bit different from my experience, when you're launching a product, you can spend hours doing it. But even that same NASA recognition came through a hackathon event where you have to go from idea to launch, not just concept, in a weekend. And so you're able to work in a team. And I don't know that it necessarily means to work harder, to work smarter, right? So I think that's where we're a bit differently, where you're interpreting it as, oh, they're going to receive more work now, or they have to do this faster. So I don't connect those two. I don't see how faster means harder. It just means smarter. Now, with AI, especially in marketing, especially in coding, now we have all of these tools that we are able to leverage. And there is no excuse for not being able to craft certain campaigns at 100 times the speed that you were able to craft campaigns 15 years ago when we didn't have these tools. And I think that in both industries, AI is evolving quickly and improving, and we need to leverage them. So the question shouldn't be, is this more work for me? It just means, how can I work smarter? But the quicker that you're able to identify whether or not something is working, whether it's a campaign, and that requires the research. But again, we've got the tools, and you have enough tools that you can start getting, hands-on in order to be able to create that campaign, that the quicker you're able to validate. And maybe it's in a startup. I'm not talking, about maybe an established company that is looking to just continue marketing, but especially when you're trying to launch something, which was my example with PodtoBook.ai, you really need to test it and see, is there a demand for it? Can I find clients? Because if you can't, then you have to move on. And so if I've spent all this time trying to craft the perfect marketing campaign, I've already invested too much before validating whether the idea is viable or not. So that's my take on speed.
So for my audience, who are typically marketers, I think, and this has been for a while because I've been doing this for a while, and about 15 years with Agile Marketing and talking in various podcasts. What I'm always aware of is that the culture of marketing is a little bit different from the culture of, say, development. And so I think it's important to understand the culture of professional marketers and understand their issues where they're facing, say, a certain volume of work and they need to get it done, right? So I don't think, Sheila, you and I disagree here, because you talked about hackathons, and to me that what you're talking about is trying something quickly, is to try something in a short period of time to see what the effect is, and then seeing if you're getting any results out of it, right? So what you're actually doing there is planning a period of time to do a certain amount of focused work and then seeing if you're getting any results out of it, which to me means that you're very focused on the work, and as a consequence, the speed happens. So, and that's kind of my point there, Sheila, which is that I don't want to fall into the situation with marketers where they have had, new folks come in and they've talked about reorganizing the company and how they approach marketing. And it just means that they end up doing more work, but they don't actually finish all the work that they need to do. Rather, what I'm trying to do is evangelize Agile and suggest to folks that by doing actually what you're suggesting, which is use small efforts, right? Over a weekend, do that work in short bursts, and then see what the results are. That's a much more effective way to work rather than trying to do, those 30 projects all at the same time and trying to do them quickly. So I actually think we're in agreement here. It's just for my particular audience, for marketers, I'm very aware that if I talk about speed, I have to explain that by working in short bursts and experimenting, as you had talked about, that is where the speed will come up from. So I'm not suggesting to people that they work faster. I'm just saying that they work focused, and as a result of working focused, which is in an agile way, that's where the speed will come from. So speed is a consequence of agile. It's not, how you work. That it's the focus work that produces the speed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I actually authored my first book, my solo book, and it's called Momentum: How to Build Daily Practices to Build Your Business and Thrive. And it is geared toward self-employed entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. And what you said brought me to my book only because one of the practices is to also use your best times. And so, for example, for John, maybe at 9 a.m., that's not when he's most creative or where, those juices are running. And perhaps it's at 3 o'clock. And you may work smarter and faster at 3 o'clock than at 9 o'clock. And so, there are studies that show that there are different elements that also come into play when you're trying to work smarter or optimize your own operating system, so to speak, of yourself. But with that, I do agree. Now, in my businesses, I've always loved to work on when I work with marketers or graphic designers or others as a team, I love to work based on results. And so time isn't normally clocking it. Are you working harder? This is a result I'm looking for. And give me a timeline. When can I count on that timeline? And what is your price for that deliverable? So it doesn't come down to, well, was I able to do that in 60 minutes or 30? So I think it also comes into play. Are you an employee? Or are you a 1099? How are you working with your team? How you also define time.
Let's go to our sponsor. It does. And, I was just thinking about AI and you mentioning that. I think that's one of the opportunities with AI, which is that, say it's on content production where you use AI to do some of the research, but you also use AI to assess whether the research is good, because you still have to have a human in the loop to make sure that any of the content that you produce is good. But in the past, I remember, working as marketing operations manager for say an agency, and we had a lot of work, and the writers had to do a lot of writing and also a lot of research, and it was tremendous, and it was rather a lot of stuff that they had to do. And so I would constantly be negotiating with clients and also the CEO of the company about what we needed to do in what sequence. So sometimes a project would come in and people would say, "Oh, well, we need to do this first," but it meant that we had 3 or 4 other clients that we were working on, and I wanted to make sure that we kept our word on that. But it sometimes meant that I either delayed that client coming in, or I went back to those other clients and said, "Hey, could we get a little bit more time on this?" It was about negotiation, but it was realizing that I was being fair to everyone, both the different clients, the CEO, and then also especially the writers, so that we didn't burn them out. Because Sheila, I can tell you, I actually I had a couple of writers that burnt out, and that's not good. So I tell you that story because with AI, that's what I see as the opportunity where we can do that research really quickly. And the problem isn't it isn't really any longer in doing the research and coming up with a draft. You still have to have a human look through it, but it's really doing the review cycles and working with a client and making sure that they can actually look at it, and then you're doing the double check. So I think the problems with AI, there are good solutions here, right? And I think that's part of the opportunity, and you've already talked about it, but I think there are sort of new problems out there. Are you seeing that? I mean, you obviously see the opportunity with AI, but what are some of the issues, and how does that affect our work?
Well, for one, the reason I ended up programming an app for my task was because just going into the front end of an AI, no matter how I tried to build it with a chatbot, it always got wonky and it wasn't consistent. And when you go through the back end, that's where I found I was able to get the result that I needed with the consistency that I needed. And so that's what led me to build something in an infrastructure that didn't exist many years ago. And so I consider that AI is like a calculator. The output is only going to be as good as the input. I could put 2 plus 2, but I wanted 2 times 2, and you're going to get different answers based on what you input. So when you get a marketer, now a marketer is normally a very creative person, and you use AI to fuel your own imagination, it's gonna, help with your own creativity. Not to go in there with a blank slate and say, create this campaign for me. No, use it as that tool so that with your expertise and your creativity, it can take you to new heights with what you can do in your abilities. And so what I would put into the AI would probably be different than what John puts in, because your focus perhaps is just on marketing, or you have more experience on a certain type of, campaign or a product. So when you take that expertise and you combine it with your imagination, you can get really creative with some of that AI. And what I really love that you said was you still need the human in the loop. So with the same Pod to Book, it takes the audio that you recorded, and that's what it is analyzing. It is not using the web to now write a book for you. It is just rewording or rewriting. It's transforming a conversation into a book format with a narrative form. Because if I just took the transcript, it would read like, John said this, Sheila said that, all those filler words. It's not readable. It's not in a narrative form. And so that's the purpose of the tool. A manuscript is not a book. A manuscript is a rough, living, working document that needs to get revised, edited, and verified by the person who's authoring the book. And so in my momentum, I edited it twice and then handed it over to another human to give me that second set of eyes, right? Where does it flow? What would you change? And then I make sure that I let people know they're getting a manuscript. Other people come back like, I thought I was getting a book I could just upload to Amazon with a cover and all. I'm like, I'm not even trying to create images with the AI because you either focus on the quality of a graphic designer, right? The AI, the book cover, or I'm focusing on the quality of the content, the written content of that transformation of the manuscript. And that's how I'm positioning myself is it's a manuscript. It still requires you to revise, read, and make that book yours.
Sheila, I think that gets to the essence of where AI is taking us, isn't it? Which is that it's that helping hand. I mean, you told a compelling story there where you have those transcripts and then AI can turn it into a working manuscript, but then you do the real work and you do the editing. And I don't know about you, but I always thought that writing is actually more about editing than anything else. You get your initial ideas down, and then once you've got that down, you can really start to structure the content and then also improve it. So I think that's a really valuable exercise, but it also, it speaks to something else, which is there's been a couple of situations where I've either worked in brands or agencies, and I've been creating content for clients. I remember I was marketing operations manager for a company that provided marketing services to real estate clients, right? And we were writing content for the realtors, and a few of them were coming back and saying, "Oh, John, it's good, but it just doesn't have our voice. It doesn't really have our voice and the style." And so I think what you're obviously there's going to be some voice in there from because it's the original transcript, but I think that next stage when you're taking the manuscript to the book form and you're doing the editing is, that's where you can really make sure you can get that point across. Are you providing any advice to your authors about how they take it from a manuscript to a book? How are you helping them go to that next step?
So to my surprise, and I had done it for podcasters because that was my initial thought was, well, I'm going to repurpose some of that content because I'm nearing 100 episodes, which was my milestone. But the very first users and the ones that really started to value the tool and were mind blown, that's the words that I've heard, are the ones that have already published books. And a lot of the people that the writing process starts with the concept of the book or they speak it. So if you go to a ghostwriter or you go and sit down with someone to talk about, well, what is your book about? Why are you writing this book? You have to start gathering a lot of times information. So where does that information come from? It can come from conversations. It can come from recordings. It can come from meetings. This very podcast conversation that we're having is content for a book. And so you have to start gathering notes, articles, research papers, interviews, and you compile all of that together. And so the people that are already using voice, we're working with transcripts, which in our podcasts, you have to write a summary. And your platform may or may not provide you with a transcript. So you're copy pasting, but now you got to figure out, well, how do I organize this transcript? So the people that were already using that as part of the process are the ones that they don't need any help. Then I started seeing other people that had an idea for a book and they want to just speak it. And so there I have partnered and I have co-authored books like How to Write Your Book in 30 Days using your spoken voice. She's a book coach. And so she'll sit with you and help you craft that outline. So now you know what you need to record and how to record it. You can record 20-minute sessions. And so you can record your entire book in one day and have that manuscript that night. That's the way that I have worked so far with people. where I got a bit surprised. Well, with the podcasters, we have some books that are a collection of stories, and you have to think, well, what ties all of these episodes together? Are we talking about a particular theme? One of them is called Unscripted Brilliance, Bold, Brilliant, and Beautiful. And those were the three parameters. She picked stories that fell into one of the three narratives, and they were either the ones that were most listened to or the most downloaded, and they fit one of the three. There are people that have over 1,000 episodes. I'm like, well, you're not going to be publishing a book with 1,000. You have to put them together in a themes. If you're a coach, I had a coach that's not a podcast. She doesn't have a podcast, but she has 25 years worth of client sessions in recordings, Zoom recordings, video recordings. So I said, just close your eyes and think of the top 10 or 15 client sessions that really led to transformation. Maybe those are the ones that you should write about, and then explain, your services at the end. And so I don't serve as a book coach. My purpose, and I'm very clear on the purpose, is once you have those audios, I can help you go from audio to published book.
Great. I love that example of the recordings between the consultant and the coach. That's great. I mean, it just shows you that you can create content at any time. So that's a terrific example. And it sounds like you've got a really great product there, Sheila. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
I want to thank you and for talking about marketing, and I loved hearing all of your perspectives.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. My thanks for Sheila Slick, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.